Welcome back to another episode of the Heatio Home Energy Show, where today I'm joined by Johnny Morehouse, Head of Business for Heitio Consumer Code. And we go quite a way back, Johnny.
We do, yes, we do. It must be now probably 2018, 2019, yeah. I think, I was literally looking at my phone the other day. In fact, actually, did Libby tell you about the Simon Roberts situation?
The multiple Simon
Roberts. And I showed her on my phone. And I think, actually, unless the other Simon Roberts is listening to this, which there is every opportunity he could be, any of the other two I'm talking about, and it was actually a negative reason where I was like, I need to call Simon Roberts. Anyway, and I got this really shitty email. And I was like, oh, Simon sent me this. So I thought, we bell him. Well, what's this all about? I was like, right. So I get on my phone, Simon Roberts. Simon Roberts. Simon Roberts. Cy Roberts. Simon Robert. I thought, I've absolutely no idea.
I just love the approach, though. I'm just going to phone each one, and it's like Russian roulette. Someone's going to answer.
I did, but you were the fourth one.
Thank God.
And I needed to call you first. That was the problem. I ended up calling Simon Roberts from SR2 Renewables. I think you might know him. He's based out in just out of North Wales. Great guy. And I said, Si, why have you sent me this shitty email, mate? He went, oh, I thought we got on really well, Jonathan. Sorry, that was my. You can cut that one out if you want. That was absolutely. my Welsh accent's not there yet. And I ended up going through all these different ones, and I thought, you know what, forget it. I'm ringing Libby.
She'll know which one.
She will know if it's.
But for the record, it wasn't me who sent you.
It wasn't you. Yeah, no, it wasn't you, and you wasn't the one that we were looking for a different reason. But it was weird because both from North Wales, both born in the same year. And I had to then actually go on to find the picture. And Libby, bless her, she went, I don't think Si's had hair for the last 10 years. So it's definitely not him. I was like, yeah, right. Okay, perfect. I've definitely got the right one. Yeah, nice one, Libby. Cheers. So
go quite a way back. And Heatio actually were a member of the Consumer Code.
You are,
as well. But for the people who are watching, I'm sure quite a few people watching from the installer community will also be members of Heitio.
Yeah.
But a little bit about you, because in the short time we've been speaking, I've already heard some pretty interesting facts about you.
Yeah.
So what would you say? I always ask, what is the most interesting fact about you as a bit of an icebreaker? But then from what I've heard already, I don't know if you can pick just one.
It's a tough one. This could be a separate podcast itself, actually.
About Johnny.
Yeah. God, yeah. People would think that's all I do, actually. What is the most interesting one? I definitely couldn't pick one of them. It could be one of the 3 or 4 current roles I do. Head of business here at Heitio Consumer Code. Have been here now just going on 6 years. I am a on-call firefighter. Yep. Quite weird, quite different. If I'm not speaking to heat pump installers or speaking to battery installers of terms of, fire regulations, I'm going into a fire where there is battery storage.
You've seen one on fire. Yeah.
We have, yes. We've seen quite some stuff on that one, so it's tough. I'm also a football scout at Blackburn Rovers. That's something you actually didn't know.
No.
Yeah, no, you're hearing about that for the first time. I'm a new dad, for the second time round. So I have an 8-week-old baby now. I have 2 Siberian Huskies. The list goes on.
You wake up at 4 o'clock.
I wake up at 4 a.m. I'm an early riser. Yeah, it's there's a lot going on in my life at the moment, and
busy man.
Well, I'm actually 18 years old. It's just I look 33.
The
that's all.
Will do that to you, mate. I think.
Well, very much so. Yeah, I've definitely put years on since coming in this industry.
But what got you from what got you into this industry?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because I think one of the only parts I didn't mention is I'm also an ex-professional American football player.
This is going to be some segue.
It's so bizarre. Yeah, I'm really struggling to see how I can then bring and tie that really back in, and it's actually quite abrupt. So thankfully, I can't even try and paint around this one. My now current wife, I say current wife like I've had a few, like Henry VIII.
No, it sounds like you're about to get rid of it.
Oh, well, to be fair, she's not waking me up in the middle of the night with a baby at the moment, so she's here to stay, I think, this one. But no, we lived in Finland, which is an odd part of the world, I guess, in terms of what reason would you live there, especially American football. American football is actually the second most popular sport in Finland. Seriously? After ice hockey. Yeah.
My only awareness of Finland is that it's freaking cold.
It is Baltic. Yeah. It is ridiculous. But we lived out there the year of the World Cup. Was it the World Cup?
Oh, when they did it they did it across kind of like the Scandinavian.
It was in Russia.
Yeah.
No, it was in Russia the year I was there. So it would have been 2017, 2018. And we had a heat wave over here and we had a heat wave over there. So it was actually 48 degrees every day in Finland, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
And we were there expecting, I've taken over like 4 suitcases of like warm weather, no shorts, no vests, no anything. And all of these clothes have literally just gone straight into like storage for the entire year. And it was such a waste. But we actually travelled over there whilst my wife was pregnant, and we didn't know at the time. So we've gone and had with our first one. We've had the full pregnancy while she's been visiting, Finland hospitals and the sort of maternity care, which was unbelievable. The parts that I made of it was unbelievable. But yeah, we were there for, like I say, for a good while. And when it was time to sort of like grow up, so to speak, and stop playing sports for a living, it was a case of, okay, well, what do you want to do? What's your thing? What do you know? And sales and business and commercial opportunities has always been my background. I've been doing that since I was selling lighters and cigarettes on the promenade from 10 years old in Blackpool, and selling paper rounds and car washes at 12 years old with my younger brothers. So sales and commercial opportunities has always been my background. I think renewable energy, solar PV, battery storage and air source heat pumps is a very promising, or at the time was an extremely promising industry and technologies that I'd looked a lot at whilst in Finland. Mm-hmm. So obviously you'll know in terms of your research and your knowledge across Europe for the heat pump side of things, Finland is actually quite a forward-thinking country, especially that side of Scandinavia. So I started doing a little bit of research. Started looking at air source heat pumps, low temperature, extremely low temperature outside, the solar PV and battery storage side of things, and sort of made an initial attempt as to when my contract was sort of like coming to an end, like 6 months towards the end of it, and we thought we might end up coming back home for the birth of our child. We then won't be going back out to a different country, because usually in American football, it's all 1 or 2 year contracts. So you go from Germany, 2 years, Sweden for 2 years, Finland for 2 years, might go and do a year in Canada, etc., etc. And I think we'd understood that I was getting to a point where I was getting sore in the mornings, and I was like, okay, I need to think about moving on now. Like I said, took this, I want to say liking, it was more of an obsession. I think, as we know with the majority of people that are watching and listening to the podcast, you as yourself as well, is if you are mad enough to get into this industry, you usually are mad enough to get obsessed with it. And the people, especially, the guys that you've had on, Graham Hendra, for example, they are mad as a box of frogs, but they are obsessed with the industry. And the obsessions and the people who are obsessed with the industry are what makes the industry. Yeah. And for me, that was a big driving factor as to why to come in. So anyway, I ended up coming home, adjusted back to 12 degrees of rain and wind and whatever, the northwest coast of Blackpool gives you at the time. Had the baby and started looking at the industry. I knew in the B2C market, it was never really my bag. I've always enjoyed dealing with other commercial and business entities, such as yourself, and looking at commercial solar, commercial heating systems, from going business to business. I had a look at that, and it really still wasn't my aspect. I wanted to speak to people who will like me. That was what it was. I just want to speak. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to effectively to get paid to speak to people who are like me, which is quite weird because if you're watching this and you think you speak to me a lot and you're now getting offended thinking you're nothing like me, then I do apologize. But ultimately, I ended up getting speaking to who was the best man at my wedding, a good friend of mine, Michael McGugan. And he was, at the time, the marketing manager, which ironically is what Mel is today. And he was the marketing manager. I got speaking to him. He spoke to me about a position that had arisen in the business, give me a nice introduction as to what it is, what it does, the industry, et cetera, the regulations, the new regulations. And came in, had an interview, lasted all of about 7 minutes. They sent me to the toilet, and I was like, oh my God, I balls this up. Like,
They sent you to the toilet?
Well, I've now known, after speaking with Mike about interview techniques, in fact, actually, I probably shouldn't say this just in case. We said this earlier, didn't we? Yeah, fuck it, I'm saying it anyway. About interview techniques as to what interviewers will say to each other if they think the interview is going a certain way. So they might say, for example, oh, it's a bit warm in here. And they're saying, this interview's gone to shit. Let's get them out of here immediately. Now, I only know that now. I didn't know this during my interview at the time. And when I said, do you mind if I just nip to the toilet really quickly? He was like, yeah, we're actually done anyway. And I was like, oh, fucking hell, we're only about 10 minutes into this interview. It's not really great. But what it was is when they given me all the information and all the PDFs and the brochures and the leaflets and the website as to, and most companies will do this now. They will say, can you go and have a look at who we are, what we do? And then during your interview, I want you to come back and sell what we do back to us.
Well, this is like the sell me this pen kind of thing.
Very much sell me this pen. And I was like, okay, well, I've seen Wolf of Wall Street. I know how this goes. That's absolutely fine. So I've come into the interview. Actually, over the weekend, I had looked at the website, had a look at what Mike had sent me, and none of it was making sense. It was like, HIES. So HIES stands for Home Insulation Energy Contractors. Right, well, first off, that doesn't even spell HIES. Okay. DGCOS, Double Glazing Conservatory. I was like, ooh, sounds like a lot, this. QA scheme supports. I was like, right, so I was like, do you know what? I'm probably not going to get the job anyway. I'm going to go re-sign American football. And then my wife at the time, no, come on, it's time. You need to get your ass together. So I was like, right, well, none of this stuff is sticking in my head whatsoever. So I turn up in the interview and they asked me, okay, so what do you know about the business? And I thought, I can't wing this. Like, there's no winging what I'm about to say. So I've said, ultimately, I don't. I've read it and I don't understand it. And they was like, well, we thought you'd have... And I said, yeah, I know. I said, I just don't understand it. And I said, that's probably more about you and the way you've marketed it to me.
That's good.
Well, don't give me props like I'm clever enough to think about it. I just said it offensively. I was trying to get out of a situation that I actually did not understand what this was. And I said, this might be the way you've marketed it. I said, but I don't understand what this is. And I said, is this what installers receive too? They said, yeah. And I thought, they're not going to understand that, And they looked at each other, almost like a light bulb moment, as in, oh, we might be onto something here. And again, I think they were giving me props for saying something that I'd not thought about. That might sound now like I'd come up with a really good sort of like reverse psychology. I wasn't clever enough to think about it, things like that. And I just turned around and said, tell you what, do me a favor. Why don't you sell me on the business? And if I think that this is the right thing to do, give me a week, unpaid, and I'll show you what I can do in the week. Unpaid, and there's no obligations, no nothing. If at the end of the week you don't like it, we go our separate ways. Wow. But you let me know what you guys do. And then I thought to myself after 5 minutes, I was like, how have I come to an interview and they're selling me on what they do? I thought, Jesus Christ, I must sound like an absolute genius here. And then Mike at the time, he when I said I'd sort of gone to the toilet, I'd come back out, and then he was sat there waiting for me. which sounds a little bit weird, but he said, how do you think it went? So I said, I don't know. I said, I don't think I was suitably prepared, to be fair. When I said, I don't really get a lot about what you do. I said, I get the premise of it, but I don't get about what you do. And he was like, well, to be fair, mate, you've absolutely smashed it. And that was a class interview. He was like, you start Monday.
No way.
I was like, what, for the week? He was like, oh, no. We know you were just saying that. And I was thinking, I wasn't. I kind of will just do it for a week. And because the thing is, I wanted to see if I liked it. I'd gone from playing American football, having afternoons off every day for 5 years, to you're asking me to come in at 8:30 and go home at 5 o'clock. Like, I need to see if I like it first. Like, this week thing's not for you, it's for me.
This is a great technique to pass on to anybody going into an interview.
Yeah.
If you can get it so that they're actually pitching to you.
Yeah.
And you've offered to work for free for a week and somehow they've gone, no, we want you now.
I think they were desperate. I think they just interviewed so many people and gone, we need to wrap this up. We need someone.
But if this was 2018.
Yeah, 2018.
We're now in 2024.
Yeah.
So if I said to you now, okay, for everybody at home, we need, what is heist? Pitch heist to people at home.
Yeah.
Well, now surely 6 years on, you must be able to, you've got that.
Yeah, I mean, I can explain who we are, what we do, how long it takes, what it's going to cost and what you're going to get for it. That's absolutely my, day and night.
Please do.
Early mornings. Okay, yeah. But the first thing I always say to everyone, and I think obviously there'll be a lot of the people who's watching this, is you need to understand who you're speaking to before you start explaining about who you are. So a sales process is always about fixing a problem and giving a solution. So let me say this, there is no bigger fan of the Heist Consumer Code than I am. I am the biggest fan of who we are and what we do. So I can sit here for hours and talk about how good we are. But we're not for everyone. Mm-hmm. We're only for the people who want to elevate themselves and provide an extra level of service. So the Heist Consumer Code itself is there to show the installers in the renewable energy sector that they adhere to and work to a certain set of standards when operating within that renewable sector. So you've got your MCS, you've got Flexior. They are the overall arching standard of installation and design within the industry. And what that does, it provides that end user, which 99.9% of the time is a homeowner or a domestic dwelling at least. And what that does, it will show them that that installation has been installed, sold and documented in a very correct manner. So the manners that's been set out by trading standards. Now, what we're there for is to approve, accredit, and really rubber stamp that installer or that organization. So when the consumer is buying, they are buying with trust, confidence, and peace of mind, which are our buzzwords, by the way. I feel absolutely amazing every time I say it out loud because I know I'm just reading from a brochure. But ultimately...
A brochure that was not there in 2018, though?
No, it was. It was a horrendous colour and it was terrible font. I'm really glad that we have got Mel now because she's come out with some of the most amazing marketing material for it. But it's... everything is simplicity. Mm-hmm. We are in a very complex industry anyway. Don't make it more complex than it needs to be, all right? That consumer needs protecting. That's what it comes down to. The consumer code is there to provide that extra level of consumer protection for the homeowner. So that's what it's there for. It has evolved over the years. So, in the inception in 2010, when the Heist Consumer Code came around, was very much a consumer protection scheme that an installer would sign up to on a membership basis. And they would effectively join the club and work to the standards that we say you need to go out there and do it. And that was absolutely brilliant because at the time, you only had RECC, the Renewable Energy Consumer Code, who also do a fantastic job in also providing that consumer protection. But we were what I like to call the noisy northerners. I think that's what Fergie called City when they came around. The noisy neighbours, that was it. And I stole it at the time, and I said to who our MD Faisal Hussain, I said, we're like the noisy northerners up there, just creating a massive ruckus and a massive circus up in Preston, and we're sort of really trying to not recreate, but move along consumer protection. That's what it was always there for.
Because there was a time when RECC was the only one you could join.
Correct.
So
correct.
When did Heis actually come along as an alternative for installs?
So the consumer code status was granted in 2015. So in terms of the actual consumer code, we are about to celebrate 10 years as a CTSI approved consumer code now.
And this is you mentioned earlier around the likes of MCS and Flexio as two alternatives. So we go back to I'm thinking back to the days of maybe 2008, 2010, when it was all you had as an option, if you wanted to get into renewables, you had to be MCS accredited and you had to be registered with the RECC.
Correct.
And then 2015, 2016 comes along and you have an alternative then to the renewable energy consumer code. But what were as you say, definitely there were the noisy neighbours. I remember when you guys came along, and you were like I think back now it was like a bit like a challenger bank coming along. It was kind of like a new entrant that came in. You had a fresh look to it. You were actually quite commercially focused, whereas I suppose RECC could become a little bit stale in that environment because they were the only one. They didn't have to compete for the work, and you guys kind of came in with marketing collateral, with a push towards the market. But what were the substantial differences between Heis and REC?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of what Heis has and the benefit that Heis has is it's learnt from all the mistakes that our other schemes within our organisation has made. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned about DGCOS, for example. So DGCOS is effectively very similar to what Heis is as a consumer code. It doesn't have consumer code status, but it's a consumer protection organisation in the double glazing sector. So the good Lord knows from the 90s and the early 2000s, obviously, how glazing was. And with Fencer and the other competent person schemes out there and the insurance-backed guarantee needs for the glazing sector, we had DGCOS first. So that was our first organisation and scheme, if you will. And then I think what's happened over time is our founders and directors, they looked at the overall home improvement industry. And anyone who's got half a brain would look at something and go, what's next? What is the next product? What is the next sort of thing that homeowners are going to start looking at? And obviously, 2008, 2009, 2010, air source started getting very, very, very more prominent now. Solar PV with the feed-in tariff that was just launching around about that time, that was getting very big. And I think we, obviously, whilst I wasn't there at the time, we as an organisation had recognised there was a very new industry that we could tap into. Mm-hmm. And usually you would tap into a product, but this was an industry. It was a forward-thinking industry. The average age of someone I would speak to is probably around about early 30s. Like, I'm talking to some guys now, and ladies as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Early 20s, mid-20s, and they're talking about like launching a 7-figure business within the renewable sector.
Innovation, isn't it? It's the amount of exciting developments in the industry and the technology and how it keeps improving. It kind of draws those people in. Yeah,
innovation, I think you've absolutely nailed it on the head there. It's such a big word because everyone wants to be different, don't they? Mm-hmm. We all want to be different. We all want to stand out. What's that different thing that our mates aren't doing? And back then, no one was doing renewable energy. Everyone knew what a gas boiler was. We all needed a gas boiler because if we didn't, we would be freezing. We all needed electricity and LPG if you're a little bit more remote, for example. But no one knew. I think air source heat pumps is, and this is controversial, air source heat pumps isn't what is needed yet.
True.
For everyone who's destroying me at home, signing up to RECC.
I can already, Graham Enders just fired
Graham Enders is on his way. What's he up to? Well, he's on doing all my hard work. Yeah, I can hear it.
If he dials in, we'll have to.
Yeah, if he dials in, I'm going. Yeah. Air source heat pumps aren't what's needed yet. Now, the government say by 2050, we are going to be clean as a whistle. And I would very much like it if that's the case. It'd be fantastic for the economy, fantastic for the future, the health of the country, and probably individual health as well. Getting there doesn't mean it needs to happen tomorrow. What it does need to do, it needs to be roadmapped in a very certain way. And I know I sound extremely political here, so I'm going to get off this subject in as quick as I can in a minute. But it needs to be roadmapped in a very certain way that it's done correctly. There are a lot of 2 up, 2 down terraces out there that does not need a 10 kilowatt heat pump stuck on the side of it just because they can get benefits through Eco4.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that. So I think, going back to your original question, so I can get off this subject really quickly because I will be here for hours. The main differences, or what we'd look to have done differently to what RECC had done, is probably not all that much, really. We just look to have done it in a different way that actually also helps the installer. That's it. The average installer, like I was saying, they've done gas boilers since they were 16 years old. They came out of school with half a GCSE and they've been putting boilers in houses since they were 16 years old. And they have propped up the heating system of the UK, which is absolutely fantastic because we would not be where we are without those guys. But those guys now are either going to stay in that sector until it literally does become a fossil fuel and it's done forever, or they will very slowly integrate and move over into the green sector, which is obviously where we sit and where we love. Now, what we have tried to do, and I think what we've done in a very excellent fashion, is we have helped guide and hold hands with all of the guys who want to change, but are a little bit objective themselves. So the majority of heat pump installers, or the majority of gas boiler installers that I will speak to that aren't yet educated on the heat pump side of things, are all very sort of dismissive. They are sort of objective against the actual system. It's overpriced. It doesn't work. Homeowners don't get it. Probably 2 out of 3 of those are probably correct, but not in every situation. And it's about educating the UK as a whole, consumer and installer, as to how that can become efficient and sort of more proactive, so we can actually push this. So that's what we've done. We've, hired some fantastic individuals within the industry that are now sat within our business that really projects all the best advice for these installers from a compliance standpoint, from a commercial and sales standpoint, from a technical standpoint, from an admin and recruitment standpoint. And what we've done is we've helped give the foundations that will allow an installer to go and do what they do best, and we can help with all the stuff that they don't do best. So we're balancing out that organization, because the consumer code status and the consumer protections that we offer, very similar to what RECC do, is to protect a homeowner. The easiest way to protect a homeowner is to stop a company from going under. If the company's still around, there's a very good chance the homeowner's going to be protected. To stop a company going under, you need to be proactive as opposed to reactive. We have been stung in the past. We've seen a lot of companies go under. I think you and I have seen a very good
big names as well,
amount of names recent as well, like shocking overnight ones as well. And I think a lot of it now is, what can we do? How can we see this early to help them stay afloat, and not even stay afloat, but also, flourish and take to the next level. So that's the differences. But if I say differences, it makes it sound like they're not doing it. They very much still are doing it. It's just that we've carved a niche out in the industry where we will take an installer to sort of like the ends of the earth to help them with things that they didn't realize they needed help with.
I think, in the time I dealt with both Rec and Heis under a previous business and seen you guys coming up, I think one of the standout differences to me was that Rec had a kind of, you can join us if we decide you're allowed in. Whereas I found with anybody that was dealing with Heis, it wasn't an open door policy. It wasn't a kind of, we're after as many people as we could. But what I found was you guys added an extra layer of support. So anybody who wanted to join but had those challenges in front of them to do it, and there are challenges, not just with Heis, but getting transitioning from fossil fuels into renewables. There are hurdles to go through, but you kind of brought a support service to the table to
Yeah.
take them through those steps.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference to installers who are facing these challenges and trying to move through the hurdles.
Yeah.
And I think one of the standout parts was the way you yes, you're a consumer code. Your job is to protect the consumer, but as you say, you were supporting the installer to so that they knew what they had to do in order to achieve this. You put the installers in a good position to make sure that they were going to be there for the long term. And we've seen installers, and actually really good installers, that companies have gone under through no fault of their own. If they've done a big contract and somebody hasn't paid them, and that means they can't pay the bills and they're forced into that position. But actually, if you can support installers through those challenges, and they can flourish, they're there for the long haul. Therefore, the customers are supported for the long haul. But in terms of the protections that Heis offer, those support services are incredible for the installer. But the actual code itself, that is a code of conduct that the installer will follow, and that includes things like the consumer contract and the templates around those kind of things.
Correct,
to make sure that this thing that when they do present it to the customer, this also meets trading standards requirements as well, which it can be a brand new world because this is, I think, one of the challenges that your traditional installers and your fossil fuel installers face when they move into this world is you could install a gas boiler for somebody on a handshake. It's going to be X amount. You agree the fee, go down to the merchant, pick up the materials, fit it. But then all of a sudden you're signing installation contracts. You're giving 14-day cooling off periods. There's regulations around distance selling or on-prem selling and things like that. This is a new world to these guys.
Oh my God, yeah, you are so right. You couldn't write a situation that I found myself in a couple of weeks ago. This was actually at the back of Solar and Storage. So I may or may not have been in a public house during this may or may not have been where this conversation might have taken place. The two individuals may or may not have been intoxicated. No idea. After what I'm about to tell you, very much so they were. And I mean, I say I overheard, I was sat kind of right next to them really. And they did and I like to exaggerate. I'm not exaggerating when I say a spit handshake. Spit handshake on he would come around next Friday and fit his boiler for him. So I'm sat there in awe, obviously, as to one, the fact he spat on each other's hand, because I thought that was absolutely disgusting. Loved it secretly, but it was disgusting. But I was sat in awe as the fact that they'd just been sat there they were actually talking about getting an air source. So this was a solar installer, which a lot of people automatically assume if you're in renewables, you know air source and you know solar. Not the case. One is water, the other one makes water go bang. It's not the case. And he had looked to get an air source heat pump from a heat pump engineer. And he'd sort of explained about how it works, et cetera, and what it's going to cost, and this, that, and the other. And the guy goes, do you know what? Like, just get us a Valent. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a decent heat pump. We'll be all right with that. No, it's a boiler. It's a combi. That's okay. That's interesting. No problem. And he's turned around and said, I'll be with you next Friday. So, right, okay. And he goes, so can you get me a certificate for it? He said, well, what do you need your certificate for? This was to the homeowner, who also actually was an engineer. He said, well, like for when I sell my house, nah, you won't need it. You'll have an EPC somewhere, I reckon. If not, you can download it and whatever, you'll be fine. It's just a boiler. If it's an air source, it's different. We'll have to do a little bit more. I said, with a boiler, I'm only charging you 1,800 quid. Don't need all the paperwork for that. He's okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'll have it for 5 years anyway. And he's done the handshake deal on it, and I'm assuming he's gone round and fit his boiler. And I've looked at that and I've gone, that is the most unregulated conversation I've ever heard in my entire life. And this is something that is going to actually heat this person and potentially family's home for X amount of years. Selling it, maybe, I don't know. But what I've learned from especially the last 2 or 3 years now is installers are actually terrified of paperwork. Terrified. Now, at first, I was a little bit more naive in terms of thinking they'll be fine. They'll sign up to a quality management system, which we'll get onto in a second, and they'll be fine. They are terrified. They are absolutely terrified of paperwork. They will do everything they can to make sure they don't have to do the paperwork. And you and I both know it's a very regulated industry and it's only getting stronger. There has to be an element of paperwork to it. There is no escaping. I don't care who you are, as to what organisation you're a part of or whatever you're going to say, there has to be a level of paperwork for it because it's what protects both parties. Now, obviously, from our first conversations were when you were with Easy MCS, which is now Green Pro, which is fantastic rebranding, which is obviously where I know Libby from. And Easy MCS, which is now Green Pro, have been a very close, I don't want to say the word ally, but they've been a very fantastic support arm to every organisation that we work with. So, and this is not a sale for Green Pro, by the way. This is just because they make our life easier, but the installer's life so much easier as well. And what it does is it provides that installer now with such a higher level but easier level of knowledge as to why certain things are important. It used to be you needed to provide this, and an installer get, yeah, okay, I need to provide it. I'll just give them that, and it was done. And the installer never knew what they were signing up to. Yes, we're talking about consumer protection and homeowners, et cetera, and what they're signing up to. But the installer never knew what they were signing up to. So all of a sudden, when something goes wrong with that installation, and in 2 years' time, that installer's got to go back out and fix it free of charge, and the installer's going, I'm £100 call-out rate. I'm thinking, no, you give them a 2-year workmanship warranty there to say that if anything goes wrong, you're going back out and fixing that. Oh, what? I'm not doing that. Why am I? And they didn't know what they were signing up to. And we talk about homeowners not knowing what they sign, but there is such an importance of installers and engineers and organisations knowing their internal processes, which is why, we've heavily anticipated and held companies' hands to looking at the likes of Green Pro and Paperclip and Trade Engine and things like that, because what it does is it provides, especially with the consultancy side of things that these quality management systems do, it provides with an engineer and an installer a layman's term but easier understanding of why they need to do this paperwork side of things. And I think now, where there's breadcrumbs everywhere now for every installation that goes on, you will always find paperwork now that you see, or you should do for the most part. I think what we're definitely finding is the installers who are wanting to do the right thing are the ones who are getting up to speed with this side of things now. They understand, for me to thrive as a business, I need to know what I'm providing the customer, but also what I'm sort of on the hook for too. Mm-hmm. And that's been a big thing over the last few years, the biggest sort of change in the industry that I've seen.
Yes, and it's been there for, the actual paperwork side's been there for so long, but I think that it becoming normalised.
Yeah.
But I always think to the installers that sit there and they'll do, I don't know, they might do a boiler installation a day, maybe a couple of services alongside it. And I think to those installers who, when they're really starting to kind of build up their self-employed customer base, and it's all about year 1, year 2, as many boilers as you can fit as you can, get them onto service plans and then maintain them. So it's volume based, Yes. Whereas if you then start looking at the heat pump installer and the types of installations, excluding maybe some of the bigger boys that are in that field, it's more specialist. They're kind of, you'll do an installation, but you might be there for a week, 2 weeks doing a heat pump installation. Solar is a little bit different now and has become a little bit more automated in the paperwork process and that kind of thing. But heat pumps are still way behind.
Yeah.
But how do you, I don't know, I go back to the lads that all kind of started on their apprenticeships around the same time as I did, and they haven't necessarily, those that haven't made the transition into renewables, And the conversations there, they're really, really straightforward. Those that have, say, I had a customer base who wanted that grant or wanted that incentive. So I didn't necessarily make a conscious choice to transition into the renewable energy sector. My customer base, my client base, based on their demographic, based on this region, were asking for something. And if I didn't provide it, somebody was going to come in and offer it. So they kind of go, the paperwork for them becomes a mandatory requirement. The schemes they have to join become a mandatory requirement to service a customer base. And then you've got these kind of huge fractions around the UK where you have customer bases and demographics that aren't interested in that kind, or either A, aren't aware, or B, aren't interested in making those financial investments into the technology, which kind of then holds back installers during these schemes, because there's a school of thought that says if more installers got involved, got accredited, adopted the paperwork, put the procedures in place, that they will drive the adoption of renewables forward. But I think that kind of period around 2010, 2014, where we saw mass solar adoption, kind of highlighted that it's consumer demand is going to be probably the thing that really changes this. But I think the really interesting point that we're at the moment is we seem to have a lot of consumer demand, a high amount of consumer demand for the products, but a serious lack of qualified and certified engineers. I don't like to say competent, because I think we've got a huge amount of competent engineers, but certified and qualified, i.e. you've been on a heat pump course and then you've gone through the journey of adopting the procedures and the regulations to become approved. But one question we always get asked is why? Why do I have to jump through all those hoops? And first of all, there's the added layer of protection. But I always think when you're getting involved in certainly if you take the heat pump industry as it is now, there's a huge grant associated to each heat pump, £7,500 grant associated to each one. So you are actually administering taxpayers' money. You're paying that out to those customers. But one of the questions I wanted to ask was in more relation to solar, and whether you see this as a view of heat pumps in the future. Solar now, there is no government-backed incentive necessarily. Yet my understanding is there's still a requirement for installers to be certified and to carry the paperwork, to be a member of the consumer code. What's underpinning that? Is that because you can still get this? Is it the smart
export guarantee? Yeah.
So is it to access the smart export guarantee? Do you still have to have those accreditations? And what would happen if somebody went and fitted a solar system that weren't a member of consumer code or MCS?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think there's a two-part answer to that one. So the smart export guarantee is almost like the baby brother to the feed-in tariff days. My mum gets the feed-in tariff. She has 5 panels on a roof, and she is still making a fortune from back in the day. And she doesn't realise how lucky she is sometimes with it. And they were getting 45 pence per unit.
Oh, she was one of the 45.
Yeah, and she lets everyone know about it as well.
That was gold time. That was.
I wish I understood. I wish I understood everything back then. Yeah. I would have made a killing on that side of things. But what's really funny is her company went bust. That installed, naming no names, literally not naming names on this one. Done it before. The company that came back out, and there was no insurance back guarantee on that one, because my mum is she's from Lancashire, tight. So unfortunately, didn't want to pay that extra money or to get that accredited installer, which she's learnt from. And I always use this as a bit of a
stick to beat it with, by the sound of things.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, she is about it all the time now. If you just listen, Mum. And I always use this as a bit of a thing for installers. I said she didn't want to spend that extra 150 quid, 200 quid, and she used Dave down the road. It wasn't to come and fit this, and they've gone. And a company that then came back out to sort some of the issues, they've gone.
Really?
A company then came back out to sort those issues, they've gone.
But these would have all, certainly I would have guessed the first one would have still had to be MCS.
The first one was, yeah. And the insurance back guarantee had gone, had lapsed by that point. So unfortunate, because these insurance back guarantees that installers will receive. They do have a certain amount of years on them.
Is this the 2 years? Is this the 2-year workmanship warranty?
Yeah, so it can be any length of workmanship warranty. You can have a 25-year insurance back guarantee on certain products, not solar or air source. But yeah, you can get certain length of warranties for any product really, if the insurer will obviously back it. But yeah, that was I think that was actually, no, it was a 2-year insurance back guarantee that she had that basically will protect the homeowner if the company is no longer trading. And obviously the company was no longer trading, but I think it was around about 5 or 6 years. Now, again, most people know that battery, I mean, you shouldn't even have a battery storage, she's got one now, but most companies will know at the time that these products don't last that long. They didn't back then anyway. The technology now is unbelievable, so they can last, you get, some have got like a 25-year, 99-year manufacturer's warranty on these things, and with panels and things like that, they're so good now. If installed correctly, they're very good. So, but I think what happened was it showed that she, to get the feed-in tariff, obviously had to have an MCS registered installer, and once that installer had gone, she was really sort of like left like looking around, and her money was gone. There was no further help in on whatever. So thankfully, it's kind of paid itself back for the fact that she's getting the feed-in tariff at 45 pence. And it's really helped. But in terms of the smart export guarantee, it's very low now in terms of payment back, for a homeowner that will generate and then sell to the grid. But what happened, what you were finding were the energy providers, to ensure that the installation was to a certain standard, where they were then going to get the correct amount of energy back to the grid, and it was monitored and it was all correct. They would make sure that the installer was MCS, and there was an MCS certificate that went along with it. And Flexiob, which is a recent qualified competitor to MCS, so Flexiob is the flexible, oh my God, I forgot it now, energy oversight registration body. Sorry, David Lindsay, you're going to kill me because I know you're going to be watching this. It's been a long day. It's actually only 9 a.m. So they are now the full equivalent to MCS, and what they did is they contacted the energy providers, said, look what we do, etc., etc. You could also call them the noisy northerners, really, but unfortunately we've trademarked that one, so you can't have that one, David. So but what they did is they showed, obviously, the energy providers what they do and the extra levels of protection they provide, etc., which is very, very similar to MCS. And the installer can then obtain a Flexiob or MCS certificate, which will then allow the homeowner to get that smart export guarantee and then the payments back from the grid.
Okay.
Now,
so that's like, it becomes then even though you could get Joe from down the road, in theory, put some scaffolding up, put some panels on your roof, electrician in to connect up the battery. You still got the building control requirements around that stuff, so your NIC, ESC, all that kind of thing. But they're saying in order to get the smart export guarantee, you've got to have so we shouldn't call them MCS certificates anymore. It's an MCS certificate or equivalent, i.e.
Correct, yeah, that's what they call it now. So it's MCS or equivalent. I do think they will be changing it to, the wording would be MCS or Flexiob certificate.
And it's a big change for the industry to have an alternative to MCS, because we haven't had that for as long as it's been around.
Absolutely.
Microgeneration certification was the standard.
Yeah.
But then there was I don't know if it's still available now, but I know Octopus Energy came out at one point and was saying, if you have the installation done by us, you'll get the smart export guarantee, and we won't make it an MCS. You won't have to have an MCS certificate, which kind of then opened up the door for not being an MCS installer in its own right. I don't know whether that got any traction in the end.
Yeah, no, so I think, and please don't quote me on this for all the keyboard warriors outside looking at this and about to destroy me again. But I think now, if you were to get Octopus on the smart export guarantee, I don't think you actually need an MCS certificate anymore.
But you are then, I suppose, if you then switched Octopus to Eon, for instance, to have you're then missing you haven't got an MCS certificate, so you couldn't get
that's a fantastic question. I'm going to have to ask John Schmick about that one.
It's just, I just think there's lots of these. I've always seen both. I've seen MCS as a fact that, as I mentioned before, you're kind of administering taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So in any world where you're distributing taxpayers' money, there should be checks and balances in place, and the benefit is that you get to administer those funds, and that means you can attract customers that in theory you wouldn't have attracted before.
Correct.
And if you don't want to administer taxpayers' money and you don't want to get involved in that, then you carry on doing your own thing, and it's fine. But then that kind of grey area that appeared when there was no government incentive necessarily for solar, and then there was this kind of window between that and smart export guarantee coming into play, and people were asking that question: well, why do this? Why put these things in place? And I think that the thing, going back to the spit handshake and the guys that they had there, if you took solar in that window of time where there was this gap between government incentive and the smart export guarantee,
I think it was about a year and a half. That yeah.
And in that window, there was people saying, "Well, I'll put your solar on. I can fit back. I'm a qualified electrician. I've got a friend who's a roofer." And I think one of the most interesting conversations I had at that time was you had two organizations quoting for the same property.
Yeah.
One certified, one wasn't. And the customer went with the one that was certified. And when you asked them the question, so price, pound for pound, price was the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you actually got to the point where this £1,800 saying, "I'll shake hand on it's because I won't do your gas certificate," because the systems had become so automated in the solar world. You actually got to a point where these two people, one certified, the two organizations, one certified, one wasn't, price point was exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
But this person, that was the organization that was certified, was able to say, automatically, you get this certificate, you get this certificate, you get a 2-year warranty, and you get the insurance back guarantee. And the other one sat there with a spit handshake, and you kind of go, well, okay, there is a difference here, and because actually they landed on the same price point, whereas a lot of people seem to think, just because you're certified and you have all this stuff, it automatically means you're going to be thousands of pounds more expensive than your competitor.
Yeah, no, you are right in that one. I think what we've seen is, take COVID, for example. And do you remember that time when that ship got stuck on the coast of wherever it was?
Yeah.
Do you remember that big ship that got stuck? Yeah. Anyway, it just seemed like it got stuck with everyone's battery storage as well at the same time, by the way, which was the worst thing in the world. Anyway, what we then found was, everything is obviously about demand for the consumer, isn't it? The price of battery storage has dropped down drastically. So you had the solar wave, so to speak, in 2022, which was unbelievably high. That was around about the energy price cap and things like that, and it was unbelievably high. So supply and demand drove the prices through the roof. Excuse the pun. Again, I'm not clever enough to think of something like that, or funny enough. And it drove prices through the roof. And what it did is it made the industry absolutely unbelievable. It was, I was going to say it was energetic. It was. I
think if you do one more, we've actually got to say you are that good.
Yeah, you cannot make a blooper video out of this because I'll get destroyed. But what we found was the energy was so rampant at the time that homeowners, it felt like 2017, 2018 again, when it was like the back end of the feed-in tariff days, and homeowners are becoming savvy. Now, I have ADHD and I do things in a very, very certain way. If I want to look at something, chances are I've watched 29 YouTube videos, listened to 17 podcasts, and read every magazine and book that there is available. And it could just be for a light bulb. That's just kind of who I am. But what we've started to find is homeowners are very much doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Now, we all have YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, everything on our phones that gives us every piece of technical information. Do you remember back in the day when you had data sheets and you felt like you owned every piece of product technology because you were the only one that had this data sheet? It's almost like you had the secrets to everything, and homeowners knew nothing apart from what you told them. Mm-hmm. We have moved on so far from those days now that, I kid you not, there is a vast majority of homeowners and Joe Public out there that knows more data about solar PV, air source, battery storage than some installers.
Absolutely.
And it's because they're willing to part with £15,000 for a system. They're gonna start looking at what this does. How does it work? What's it going to cost? You know, what am I getting bang for my buck? So they are going so far down a rabbit hole, which I do, with everything now to a point where they are learning about that product inside and out. So what it's done is, in a way, they've subconsciously educated themselves, and they've stumbled across highs. They've gone, right, Octopus Energy, Eon, OVO, Project Solar, Heatio, they're all highs members. Look at all their products. Look at how they do things. That is unbelievable. Okay, yeah, it's a bit expensive. Right, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get a few more quotes. We'll get Dave down the road because, you know, he fit Zoe's air source last week, and, you know, she's getting hot water for the first time in 20 years, so he must be good. So we'll check him. Oh, he's coming out at £1,000 less. Right, yeah, okay, but I've read all these things, and all these things that say have got highs and things like that, and these are the extra levels of protection I'm going to get, but he's not got it. So what's actually happening now, which is making my job so much easier, is the consumers are going to the home to the installer and going, I'm really happy with everything that you've got. Why don't you have highs? Why aren't you MCS registered? Why aren't you Flexi registered? Well, it's an extra cost, and I don't really see the benefits. And what it's actually doing, it's role reversal. So we talked about the interview process earlier. The homeowner is actually selling highs to the installer and going, well, if you had it, I'd buy from you.
That's huge, isn't it?
The installer's ringing me going, right, I've had a customer last week and they've asked for that we need to be a member of highs. And I'm thinking, this has changed so drastically to when I first started doing this 6 years ago. You know, consumers didn't know a thing. But now, consumers have got quotes from 5-6 different companies. 5 of them have got highs, 1 doesn't. Why don't you have it? And then all of a sudden, now it's actually coming from within to out. So, we speak about obligations. We spoke off air, didn't we, about the obligations that the experts in the industry have to educate sort of inwards. Now the homeowners are the ones who are educated, and for the first time ever, and long may it continue, by the way, for the first time ever, the homeowner are actually educating from within to out, and they're telling the homeowner, the installers, about best practice and deposit protection guarantees and mediation. I want mediation. Yeah. I'm a homeowner. I want mediation. Installers going, what's mediation? Is that not where you cross your legs and you put your hands to? No, that's meditation, you clown. And it's showing a completely different side to what homeowners are now looking for.
It's a different world. You see them now with we've seen a consumer actually sent us through the spreadsheet that they'd created.
Yeah, the quotes.
Yeah, but it kind of had. So their journey started with, they'd seen an advert for £7,500 boiler upgrade scheme, or the boiler had broken down, and they Googled, right, £7,500. Okay, if I can get £7,500 to a new heating system, I'm planning on spending £2,000 or £3,000 anyway on a boiler. So okay, I could go for a heat pump. They had solar and battery, so it kind of
offsets.
Yeah, and increased their self consumption from solar and all that kind of stuff. So they'd educated themselves.
Yeah.
But their starting point was, okay, there's a £7,500 grant here. How do I get access to that? And then it was, okay, MCS was one, and then it was, you had to be a member of Consumer Code, and it was HICE. So they looked then, first of all the installers in their region, and they had them all listed as MCS installers.
Yeah.
Which of those installers then had HICE, didn't have REC, they only had HICE on there as their thing.
Wow.
And I think that's a big part. That comes down to brand presence. You guys have put yourself out there. People know of you guys.
It's a domino effect. If one's got it and they're doing well, the next one wants it. And, we brought Octopus Energy on board last year, and you can probably imagine what that's done for us in terms of, they've got it. Well, we probably only
becomes a qualifying factor, doesn't it, for the homeowner?
It does. Of course it
does.
But
I think that one was, it was then the layer down from that, and I thought this was really interesting. The next level down was the manufacturer that installer was certified by.
Really?
So as in which kit they would install.
Yeah.
Because by that point they had already decided they wanted so this particular customer was, I'm definitely having a Give Energy battery.
Mm-hmm.
So it was you. So by the time, bear in mind, they haven't even got to price at this point. So their qualifying criteria was they have to be an MCS accredited installer. They have to be a Heist member. He had solar, but he wanted to add he had solar and a battery, but he wanted to add the bigger battery. So he knew he wanted to be Give Energy. And they also had to be certified by Samsung because he wanted a Samsung heat pump. So they actually, and so he's gone from this huge list of installers down to, there was about 2 or 3, of which we were one of the ones that they were coming to on the list. But then other things started to come in about, so this triggered us really, about being FCA accredited. He wanted access to finance to fund it, and he wanted the installer to essentially do the arrangements for that. So we're teaming up with Home Tree to offer a long-term lease deal for the full pack of technology, doing it in partnership with E.ON with a specific tariff to support that called Energy as a Service. So you've got this installers, like this consumer has gone down to that level, and then when you get down to being an FCA accredited, I think we have to be an independent
IAR. IAR, yes. Yeah. Independent appointed representative.
That's it. Yes, we have to be an IAR, which is the final hurdle we have to go through, in order to be able to quote this customer. Now, I am sure, if I went back and spoke to my kind of fossil fuel installer friends back home.
Fuck, I love it that you call that.
Yeah. That's what I call them now. They're my fossil fuel friends.
They're all in a group chat now.
Yeah, but you know what happened? Honestly, there is. And the battles that go on.
F asterisk CK heat pumps. Yeah, that's what they call themselves.
Because they're quite happy doing boiler replacements. But you know how that started? It was when we first started Easy MCS, and the first person I helped go through the accreditation process after doing it myself was Havod Renewables.
Oh yeah, up in
Denby way. North
Wales. We went there not too long ago, actually.
And he's gone through and now I think he's just been bought out by Centrica or something, or Certas.
No, Certas. Yeah, Mark Deeney, he's the head of renewables over there. Yeah, they've just been bought out. Yeah.
So that's just, and I see him and he still hasn't bought me a beer, and I'm like,
Mark Deeney?
No, Dave Jones, the guy who set up Havard.
Yeah,
I was like, so these ones that went on that journey, he started out as a job an electrician.
Yeah.
And then he sells his business to Certas doing solar battery and heat pumps. And the other guys we all in the same year in school, we all did the same apprenticeships at that time, and they're still going around commissioning boilers in people's homes.
Yeah.
So and they'll still tell me now it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Getting into the industry.
Of course.
And Dave's driving around in a brand new Tesla.
I wonder why.
And living life.
I wonder why.
So there is gaining access to these accreditations and being able to be involved in those schemes, and I think the consumer knowledge around the consumer code and the protections that brings, I think it will start to fade out, those kind of spit style handshakes over time.
Has to. It has to. It can't not, because what you'll find now is, so we live in a new build, and so we have panels on our roof, and it came with an MCS certificate. Okay, well, if I now want to go and sell my house, I need that MCS certificate. The guy who's got spit dripping off the bottom of his hand, when he goes to sell that house, they might ask for the service plan, or they might ask for the latest EPC or the manufacturer's warranty on the boiler. How are you going to get that? Now, I think when you say it's going to phase out, as boilers phase out, which I am a little bit sad about, by the way, just so we're aware, again, no daggers, but I am a little bit sad. I grew up with them, as we all did. As they start to phase out, and obviously heat pumps are going to become extremely prominent, whether it is just heat pumps, hydrogen, which I am not the biggest fan of, by the way, again. I think most of us aren't. But as the heat pump side of things start to really phase in, all of that paperwork and all of that sort of knowledge and documented information, that has to be there. So that's going to actually push those guys out anyway. And like I said, I go back to education. It's our job to educate those installers. So those installers who are sort of, objective to it, I get it. I get why. They've never had to do it. So all of a sudden, why do I have to do it now and not get paid any more money for doing paperwork? Well, that makes no sense to me. Well, they have to protect the homeowner. it's simple. You're going to protect the homeowner anyway because, you live around the corner. You're going to protect them. You're going to be there. You're going to see them in the pub Friday night. You're going to protect them. Just put it on paper.
That's it.
Just put it in an email. Put it on a document. And then just store it in a nice little place where everyone can see it. And if you sell your house, and then move all that document to the new homeowner.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing. You're already doing it. Just document it. And I think that's, like I said, that's what's going to happen with that side of things. But I'll tell you an interesting one. And I'm really, really intrigued to see where this goes. Eco4.
So this is for those who don't know, this is the energy company obligation.
Yes.
It's the fourth round of it.
I call it edition. Sounds cool.
Fourth edition.
Fourth edition.
Energy company obligation version 4.
Yeah, I like that.
Return of the poor installations.
Yeah. Oh, you went there. I mean, he's not wrong, but he went there. Yeah. So, and I'm not glad you said it, but you're not far off where I'm going with it. So, we obviously have a huge part of the UK where they are in fuel poverty, not through any fault of their own, not through the builders who put it on, but most likely due to technology not being ready and certain political parties getting their own way. It's just the way it works. So there is a ton of households out there that don't have heating, don't have great electric, they're paying through the roof, no insulation, etc., etc. So the government are obviously putting things in place with the energy providers, who we are finally getting our money back from those energy providers after taking it all from us in COVID. And what they've done is they've put these energy company obligation things in place, which is now developing that property from a energy efficiency standpoint. Now, up to Eco3, there wasn't, if any renewable energy measures that were in there. So it was very heavily around boiler replacements and wall insulation, which is fine because any, energy efficiency property that you have, to build a solid foundation, you need to put things in place to stop the heat getting out. And that is always going to be fabric. So always, yes, fabric first. That's with obviously heat pumps as well, not just boilers. But now what we're seeing is a lot of renewable energy technologies now going into eco. Now, we see the good and bad side of that, as you can probably imagine. Everyone's got their own opinions on it. Race to the bottom, no homeowner, so no one's paying for it, therefore no one cares, etc., etc. And I get all of it, and I'm not here to myth bust or anything like that. I always like to get people's take on why or what they think of, and we're all reversing.
I was going to say,
I'm asking you the question. It's just because I know
this wasn't in the script, was it?
No, it actually wasn't. Sorry about that. It's because I know you're an extremely, and probably most people who sat where I'm sat now, most extremely passionate about the products itself. Do you think that having heat pumps in eco and social housing and hug and warm home grants, which is coming in, do you think that is right for the industry?
Having them in, yes. How it's been applied, no. And I think we've got somebody gave me this analogy the other day, so I'll try it out and see if it makes any sense.
Yeah, go on.
It's like trying to get, if I wanted to go from here to Manchester and I didn't know the way, what would I do now? I'd go on Google Maps and it would tell me the direction to get from here to there in whatever was my preference. If I want to get there in the quickest time, or if I want to get there the shortest distance, and it's going to set out my roadmap to get from here to there. And my underlying frustration with it, and there'll be people that will say, well, we've put standards like PAS 2035 in place and all these kind of things. My underlying frustration is that we haven't got Google Maps for our housing stock. So we, about 18 months ago, we started our investment round, and we've spent so far about £2 million developing a piece of digital twin software that essentially connects to a home via the smart meter, and starts to create a digital representation of that home in a database. So imagine when Google Maps first started, you've got this kind of this globe, and it's flat on the exterior.
Oh, now you're opening it.
No, I'm not going into flat work. It's smooth on the outside of it, and then the Google cars start driving around with the spinny cameras on top, and all of a sudden the globe starts to populate, and you start getting these visual representations of the journey that you can go on. And you can do that same thing with properties. You can create that digital twin, and that enables you then to run simulations of impacts of technologies. So we've just done our first batch. So we've just done 1 million simulations ran through the model. And the amount of interesting insight you get right down to a granular level in the home when you take the 3 core factors, the building fabric, the occupancy profile, and the climate data.
Okay.
So that's what the building looks like and how it performs, how the people use it, and what's the weather like in those particular conditions when they're using it. And the reason why it irks at me a little bit when we start putting heat pumps in is because we're saying the EPC says this house should be good for a heat pump because it's going to reduce their carbon emissions. Whereas I've genuinely seen firsthand people come to us, connect their home, we ran the digital twin, and they've gone, I'm thinking about having a heat pump. And when we run the digital twin, which essentially looks at their half-hourly energy data, we take their gas data, we segment that via an algorithm into heating and hot water loads and cooking if it's done by gas. And you look at it and go, you barely use any gas for heating. And we've actually had people that have been ashamed to admit it. We've had people that have come on and said, yeah, I keep my home at 21 degrees pretty much all year round, or within the heating season. And this doesn't stack up. We've run the simulation. We've seen your gas usage. These two things don't equate. And only upon questioning, saying, have we got something wrong? Is there something wrong in the data? To be honest, I can't afford to have the heating on. The house stays at 14 degrees pretty much all year round.
14.
We actually said that particular one, there was a spike one day, which was Christmas Day, when the family came round.
Yeah, so
to the outside world, it looked like he kept the home at 21 degrees.
Right.
The reality was, could not afford to have the heating on.
No.
Putting a heat pump into that home is not the next best thing that person would need.
Right.
But that's what they were getting promoted. And actually then when you looked at the performance estimates they were getting using the existing methodology at the moment, it was, this home, you spend 22,000 kilowatt hours a year on space heating. They were nowhere near it.
No.
They were closer to 6,000 kilowatt hours. By having a heat pump, you're going to save this much money. And it's like, it's not even, they're not spending that much now.
Yeah. Is this another company that's then gone in and give them that information based off what they've told that other company?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this, the company have gone in and done their heat pump system design, as in size, specification. They've then taken their EPC, and the EPC says 22,000 kilowatt hours for space heat, and then they've ran that through the MCS performance estimate and come out with the output on the other end. And there's so many factors then that play into that. And what should have been the journey for that customer, taking the past 2030 thing, I get.
Yeah.
There has got to be some standardization around it. But there's an element of, this person was a homeowner, this was their home, what was the right thing for them? And actually the driver for that person then changed completely. It moved away from, I'm trying to save money. What they're actually trying to do was achieve 2 or 3 degrees higher levels of comfort in the home, be able to have the heating on a little bit longer for the same spend. And actually when you ran it through, and the way they ran their heating system, and they have it, they had it on for a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours, the right thing for that person was to have a boiler.
Yeah.
In the way they lived their life, they weren't going to change, they were in their 60s, the kids had all left home.
Yeah.
They weren't going to all of a sudden change their profile.
Yeah.
Yet they were being offered a heat pump under Eco 4. And I was kind of saying to that person, to be brutally honest, I love heat pumps. I will talk about them forever and a day. And I said to that person, look, this is not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Even if it's free,
yeah.
It's not the right thing to put in your home.
But it's free up front.
Exactly.
It might not be free.
You tried running it in those 2-hour periods every day.
And you wait till they turn it off, because they will. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you wait till, and they will, and put it in silent mode. That's something I learned from Graham on LinkedIn as well the other day. It's
silent
like, that blew my brain. No, and do you know what? I'm really glad that you've said that, because it kind of really confirms a lot of things that I'm thinking. Just because something's free doesn't mean it's right. And solar PV, we know what it is. We know on the 3 days a year that we get some sun, and you are going to generate electricity. I get it. It works. It's a tried, tested method. Heat pumps, it's not exactly a new product anymore. It's been around 15, 20 years. And well, actually, it's been around a lot longer, but in terms of the way we know it now, it's been around long enough to understand what it takes. I think what it is, the eco side of things, and we just tend to sort of label it the funded market, so to speak. So we have able to pay, which is what we all know, and the funded market, where obviously they are entitled, so to speak, to grants or whatever it be. I'm a huge fan of it because it is ultimately going to get us to where we need to. 2050 is not going to get. We're not going to get there without something like this. It is very obvious. We know that, and we're okay with that. I am very much in a case of understanding each design and scope and the installation side of it to make sure it's right. Because if it's not, we can work for the next 25 years as hard as possible and throw these heat pumps in, and we'll tick all the boxes, and we will look like the most up-and-coming country in the world at the time. But in 2051, 2052, 60, 65, when my little boy, who'll be, I don't know, I'm not good at maths, he'll be older, and my youngest, I was going to say my newest, my youngest boy, I'll tell you what, have you got kids? Yeah.
Yeah.
You got more than one?
No, just one.
Just the one. The transition from saying my little one and my oldest or my youngest, that's going to take some getting used to.
Just them.
Them. Yeah, and we're not getting started on pronouns. It's them. But with those, that's my worry. And, I'm 33 now, believe it or not, but by that point where I might be in a different situation or a different role to what I'm doing now, I might not. I hope I'm not, actually. The amount of worries and issues that we're going to see then because of the way we're dealing and acting now, that terrifies me. That absolutely terrifies me, because if you have a bad boiler install, Dave down the road can come in, rip it out and put a new one in, get a plaster in, and it looks good as new, so to speak. You go wrong with a 10 kilowatt heat pump system, that is going to be a 35, 40,000 pound refit, and you're going to have issues.
And it's the echo of it, isn't it? It's another.
Of course it is.
If you're not conditioning the customer, if the property's not in the right place, if their mindset's not in the right place to have it, and I think a big factor that we're seeing. So we launch our smart charge product in November, which is the ability for somebody to connect their battery to the platform, and it will optimize it against a tariff, opening up the market a little bit to those ones that maybe outside of Octopus, some of the newer tariffs that are coming onto the market. And it's incredible that you see the impact that just a battery as a standalone can have. We've seen people coming in that used to, they would always have the opinion solar and battery had to go together.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing these apartment blocks coming online that don't have solar. They're just having a battery fitted in their home. They're on fully electric, and this ability to kind of charge and discharge during these periods. And I look at some of those the homes that we've heard coming through on Eco4, more from advice. They're asking, is this the right thing? Am I getting conned or whatever? And when you give that advice to them, you actually say, no, there's nothing wrong with what they're offering you. It is a legitimate scheme, whether it's the right thing for you.
Yeah.
And then they connect the home to the platform, and we run the simulation, and actually you start going, hang on, you could have actually saved. Your better choice here might be to go down the route of putting battery storage in first. Is battery storage included in Eco4? Can they get it under Eco4?
No, and whether they can or can't is a different story, but I believe it's not included.
That would be an incredible.
Would that be Eco5? Is that what
Possibly,
Eco 5 is? Is that Eco 6?
Because I don't know whether they give. I know solar fell into it in a bit, and they did a lot with EWI and cavity wall and roof and loft insulation. But I just think battery storage can be so powerful, and the capacity of it. If we're saying that the journey is decarbonisation, if we're saying electrifying our homes is the way forward, then what we're missing is capacity in the home to manage and store it, and obviously capacity in the grid. But we've done a project recently with a SunAmp thermal battery, hot water batteries, and again, an incredible piece of technology where the home was restricted to about, in terms of traditional hot water storage, about 120 litres, fitted a 300 capacity SunAmp, so it's equivalent to 300 litres, and they've now shifted all their charge for the hot water into off-peak periods.
Oh, wow.
So they're getting, and they're actually able to, if they do a full charge during off-peak hours, it's lasting them 2 days.
Yeah.
Whereas before, the way it was set up was they were having to charge it during the day to make sure they had, they'd use it in the morning for the evening. Yeah. So these kind of energy storage solutions, especially when you get the likes of the Give Energy Kit, and I know there's others coming on the market where you can store and discharge back onto the grid.
Yeah, the hybrids,
You can actually earn off it through the smart export guarantee.
Yeah.
So I think the principle behind Eco is great. Mm-hmm. It's there for the people who absolutely need it. We're big advocates in this world of making clean energy more affordable.
Of course.
But I think there's just a little bit of tightening up around the specification around it.
Yeah, I think PAS coming in and writing the standards for battery storage, I think that stinks of battery storage coming into Eco. It's got to. Why would it not do?
Yeah.
Battery storage is the best product in the world, second to none. I am the biggest advocate of battery storage. You're seeing now cars with battery storage, which will then charge off peak and then sell back to the grid.
Yeah.
Which is the most simple concept in the world.
But
delivering it is going to be a all different ball game.
Yeah. We think of these autonomous cars?
Autonomous cars. Yeah,
that's fine. They can drive without a driver, but then as soon as you start going, okay, actually, no. Not only can it drive without a driver, but it's also going to start discharging back to the grid when you're asleep, and you might wake up and find out your batteries, all your battery's empty, and you can't go anywhere.
Unbelievable, and that's what AI does. We are moving away to. We're going into the iRobot days, aren't we? Which is, it's not the worst thing in the world for some people, trust me. But I think now like I said, because I'm a geek when it comes to these things, and seeing where battery storage was and where it is now and what it can do, and with the systems that you guys have built in terms of what it can do for the customer without having to do anything whatsoever, it's so exciting, and I'm so glad that I'm now part of that journey. I'm so glad that I almost get to influence part of that journey as well. It is a real blessing, and being with you as well and working with you guys to get to that point together. It's really, really exciting. So yeah, it's a good take. I'm really glad that I asked you about the Eco side of things, because a lot of people are very emotional about it and not logical, because most people are installers and no one deals with logic, only emotion. And so it's good to really get a logical take on that. So, yeah, I'm really glad I asked.
Well, we are about wrapped up for this episode.
Yeah.
You can join us for the next episode where Jonathan will be asking me more questions. and thank you very much. And we'll catch you on the next episode.
Perfect. Thanks.